So so very often we are kind of driven by these base desires: power, status, money, physical pleasure, and craving and the ego are wrapped up very closely together, aren't they? That kind of sense of I want, I want or I need, and we see beauty in the relatively mundane. So, for example, the emphasis on sort of physical beauty. And if we are driven, if we inhabit the karma loka, then we are driven very much by sense desire, and it's difficult to create an impetus for real spiritual change. And we just have to look around us, don't we, at the effects of inhabiting this realm. Like, for example, the power in the world of politics, and they're quite extreme. These forces can be quite extreme, can't they? Wanting power to the extent that we would happily destroy others to get it. So experiences of beauty, such as nature or art, refine our emotions and raise them to a higher level. And we'll come back a bit. We'll come back and explore a bit about why that is. But beauty can elevate our consciousness in a way that is similar to higher states of consciousness that we can experience in meditation. So a more refined level of consciousness than the karma loka is the rupa loka, and we move into this realm when we go into kind of higher states of consciousness in meditation. So I'm sure you'll be familiar with the kind of dhyanas. So when we're in dhyana, we are inhabiting this more kind of refined state of consciousness, and in this realm, form and sense and sense of self become much more subtle, actually, and we're much less attached to our base desires, and then beyond that we move into the kind of arupa loka, where the sense of form becomes even more kind of subtle, and so we can see these kind of levels of consciousness as a kind of as a kind of an ascent to kind of beauty, and in a way, when we engage in art or nature, we can elevate our consciousness in the same way as we can in meditation. Which is how is one of the reasons we can become so absorbed in art, for example, nature. They both have this kind of, there's this kind of common theme, isn't there, that we can become very absorbed in meditation, and in a way the same process is working when we become absorbed in beauty. And perhaps I'll say a little bit about those similarities. What is it that leads to that kind of that makes those two aspects similar. I think in both meditation and beauty, we start to go beyond the world of concepts. Just like it can be quite difficult to kind of talk about a deep meditation experience. It's almost like there aren't the words to do it justice, and it's the same with it's the same with beauty in a way. We can't describe a beautiful sunset, can we? It's saying that it's red and pretty or something just doesn't kind of do it. Just doesn't kind of do it justice. Yeah. And secondly, I think both meditation and beauty start to just take us beyond our sense of self. Yeah, and this can be quite subtle, can't it? So, for example, in the mindfulness of breathing, we just start to get a sense of how we kind of associate a sense of self with our thoughts or something, and in metta, perhaps we get a sense of our relative importance compared with other people or something, and it just starts to kind of shift the sense of self. And I think that this happens in beauty as well. I mean, for me, nature, and particularly the sea, is always a kind of strong reminder of my relative place in the world. Yeah. So so there's this idea that because kind of meditation and beauty start to go beyond concept and start to go beyond self, they are more attuned. They're kind of more in line with how the world really is. And the meditation, higher states of consciousness and sort of and beauty are very closely intertwined. So in meditation, we can just start to move into a kind of a deeper beauty. So as we kind of go from the Karunanātha to the Rupaloka, we just start to get in touch with a deeper level of beauty. And so just as an example, we can very easily see beauty in our metta bhavana practice, can't we? I'm hoping a slide will appear, which is just thank you. So this is just a quote from the Metta Sutta, actually. Whatever living being there may be, feeble or strong, tall, stout or medium, short, small or large, without exception, seen or unseen, those dwelling near or far, those dwelling far or near, those who are born or those who are to be born, may all beings be happy. There's just something, deeply beautiful about that idea that it's a very kind of noble aspiration, isn't it? And it's quite away from perhaps where we habitually are in the kind of Karunanātha driven by our senses. But actually, Bhante talks about metta being I find this really interesting because he talks about metta being a rational emotion, an emotional response that is appropriate to reality. And this may seem really really surprising given how kind of self-obsessed we normally are. But actually, the most reasonable response when we think of others is that we wish them well in the same way that we want the best for ourselves. It's very rational to understand that others are actually no different from ourselves. And the reason, the point I'm trying to bring out here is that I think the reason that metta is beautiful is because metta is a very kind of rational emotion, and it accords with reality, and in a way that is what kind of makes it beautiful. In a way that's difficult for us to see, isn't it? Because as I say, generally we think everything revolves around ourselves. Yeah, but it's quite a shift, isn't there? Isn't it? There's that kind of move from thinking, that we're the centre of the universe into a kind of well-wishing for the kind of whole of humanity. Yeah, I wonder, could we have that slide back? Not the last one, but the one before that. Thank you. Bit about that. I called it the ascent to beauty, which is actually slightly mixing the Dharma with Plato, because this idea of the ascent to beauty was a kind of what was something that sort of Plato came up with, and he I just really like it because he described ascending to the divine or to God through the truth, beauty, and moral virtue. And he talked about the journey to wisdom starting when we observe the beauties of earth, to quote, and then we mount upwards, leaving them far behind. Yeah, so Plato talked about sort of truth and beauty and moral virtue, which I guess the latter we think of in terms of ethics, but all I think have this kind of thread of beauty running through them. Yeah. So in terms of the Dharma, we can say that as consciousness is refined and the self becomes more subtle, we could say an equivalent is the kind of arising of the bodhicitta, which is this kind of spontaneous move towards enlightenment, which is kind of grounded in a kind of desire to help all beings. And this kind of arises when the sense of self becomes more kind of subtle or something. Yeah. And Sangharakshita talks about he talks about there being degrees of beauty from the sensuous to the spiritual, and from the spiritual to the transcendental. So beauty can raise us from our ordinary consciousness to something higher. And in this way, I guess in this way, we can see the whole of the path as one of increasing beauty. Okay. I'm very quickly running out of time, so I'm just going to say, make one other point about which relates to how Bhante talks about beauty being able to expand our consciousness. He talks about both the Dharma and art involving an expansion of consciousness beyond the usual limitation of the ego. Talks about the Dharma expanding consciousness in terms of a greater understanding of reality and increased compassion. And he talks about art doing it through an increased sensibility and appreciation of beauty and increased sympathy for experience beyond our own. So I really like that last bit, the increased sympathy for experience beyond our own. Yeah. So yeah, as I say, I'm slightly conscious of time, so there's lots more to explore, but perhaps we will come back to that next week.